Hey guys, this is my second devlog on my indie game, which is going to be a 2D Metroidvania based on mountain climbing and exploration. And this time I will go through some of the specific tasks I did the past 2 weeks. So first of all, I worked towards a very early demo which I gave to a few people for playtesting. So while this is nowhere near a complete game, I still think it's very good to start playtesting very early on, especially as soon as you got your core mechanics done. Especially as a solo developer, you kind of start to lose sight of a few things in your project. You get so used to certain things like your controls, your mechanics, that you cannot really judge them anymore. So for me, it was definitely very helpful to see some external people play my game and get some feedback on whether I'm still on the right track and to make sure that I'm not creating something that's not fun at all to play. So with that having said, let's get to work. So one of the major things I did was I added a completely new area, which is a wasteland kind of area in contrast to the Snowy Pass, which is my first area, which you've already seen parts of it in the first episode. And these two areas differ very much in terms of visuals, which is why I'm still thinking of how to make a good transition between those two. In terms of world building, I think is crucial, especially if you're designing like big connected worlds, that you have really organic transitions between the different areas in the world. For that, I also redesigned the tileset for the first area, for the Snowy Pass, a little bit. So since this area is in the lower mid part of the mountain, I really didn't like that it's that snowy, so I really want to reserve the fully snowy areas for the upper parts of it. So I kind of redesigned it a little bit to be a little more like rocky mountain pass with occasional snow parts. This is obviously still far from finished. I like to do this iterative approach with most of my graphics. I also started on the main city, which is actually a rather small town, which is separated into different parts, and more of the town can be accessed as you progress in the game. So the town so far contains a few NPCs and houses. So for the NPCs, I've created a very simple dialogue system. So the dialogues are loaded from a JSON file, and they use a simple state machine based approach for organizing different dialogue flows. So there are different message types like simple, straightforward text messages, but then also simple multiple choice dialogues where the player can choose, like for instance for buying an item, choose whether to accept or decline an offer. And the system is basically very extendable based on what I will be needing in the future. The houses are basically separate level sections which are located somewhere off the map. Basically, when the player is entering a house, he's teleported to this location. I don't know if that's a good solution actually, but for now it works, and it was very easy to integrate within my current way of handling level transitions. I also have full lighting control, so when the player enters a house, you can decide whether it's dark in there or whether it has certain lighting and environment conditions. Because I gave away a small demo to people, I needed to have persistence and a save game mechanism in a game early on. So gameplay wise, I decided to use these tents with campfires as save points with set locations, so similar to Hollow Knight. Once you reach one of those, you can basically save the game, and when you die you respawn at the last save point. Also, these tents and campfire fit my narrative with mountain climbing well, I think. On the technical side, I created a persistible interface for all game objects whose state needed to be saved. As with the NPC dialogues, I used JSON for serialization. By the way, I used the JSON.NET library for advanced JSON serialization. So basically Unity has a built-in JSON functionality, but it's pretty basic, and once you need a little more advanced stuff like serializing dictionaries, which I personally use a lot, then Unity's built-in library can't do this. And using a library like JSON.NET saves you a lot of trouble. So besides that, implementing persistence was pretty straightforward. One of the biggest issues was actually execution order when loading the game. So for that you really have to think about the difference between awake and start, and especially where your dependencies are. I added several new game mechanics. One of those are those gemstone veins, where you can mine different gems which serve as one of the game's main collectibles or currencies, which enable you to buy certain things from NPCs. I want puzzles to be a main part of the gameplay and of the world, so I created an early generic kind of puzzle solving system. The idea is that in order to solve the puzzles you have to gather certain information which come from the story or from certain NPC dialogues, but also from other sources. So I really want these puzzles to be deeply integrated within the game's story and world. As you can see in several occasions, the enemy behavior is still buggy as hell, so I tried to make the enemy behaviors as generic as possible from the start on. But as it seems, this resulted in a lot of weird behavior and I'm still struggling to fix these things. So one of the things that cannot be missing in Metroidvanias are maps. So I started to create an early version of an updatable world map. So my idea is to have different kinds of maps which you get from different people as you progress in the game. First map is very sparse in terms of detail and also not that accurate, and as you progress you get access to more advanced, more accurate, more detailed maps. So the first map I've implemented now is essentially revealing more and more of an underlying texture which contains the entire thing. So from a technical perspective, this was done using render targets or render textures in Unity. So a render texture is essentially a texture which can be updated or drawn to dynamically at runtime. This texture is just containing the information on where the player has already been, and then a simple shader is taking care of combining this render texture with the underlying texture and revealing basically the overlapping parts. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this second update on my indie game. So if my progress continues, I hope to be back in 1 or 2 weeks with my next update. And I also hope to be able to release an early demo of my game to you guys as soon as possible. Other than that, have fun creating and hope to see you next time.